The CAIDX project is funded by the Interreg DSR. It's an EU project, and it's focusing on clinical artificial intelligence-based diagnostics. In today's webinar, we have a specific focus on IPR in relation to AI and the use of patient data. You are most welcome to ask questions during the webinar. You'll do that by placing your questions in the chat, and then we will either give them to the presenters during the webinar or in a Q&A session after the webinar. So please feel free to ask questions. After the webinar, you will receive the presentation in a mail, so you don't have to take a lot of notes or photos during the webinar. And I think on that note, I would like to welcome our two presenters of today. It's Jørgen Møller from Patentgruppen. He's a CEO, partner, patent attorney, and a European design attorney. And we have Jens Jeppesen, Patentgruppen. He's also a partner, European patent attorney, and European design attorney. And as I said, both of them are from Patentgruppen, and Patentgruppen is working both with very big companies, they're amongst others representing Alibaba in Europe, but they're also working with startups, and actually that's a group of companies that they like to work very much with because they can follow them from the startup phase until a possible exit. And I think with those words, I'd like to welcome you.
And thanks for that. And we're working on stuff we are going to share with you, and I think we're there, right? Good. Good to see you all. I'm Jørgen.
En design webinar i dag.
Sorry?
AI, han er medlem af. Ja. Men jeg tror ikke, det er relevant.
Yeah. Okay, the seminar is about to start here, relevant or not. So we have been through the introduction, and what we're going to talk about today is, my colleague and I, is patenting of AI. And that is going to be a part of the presentation. We're also going to, as a part of this, we're going to look at some practical examples of how you can do that. But even more, and maybe more important, it's we also here sort of to based on what we're going to tell you about patenting of AI and the examples, we're going to give you some considerations or motivations or some stuff you need to look at when you are going into collaboration with, even if you're a health care provider, so hospital, whatever, if you're a developer or something. In all these collaborations, which is an inherent part of AI, patenting is a pretty important thing to consider, whether you want to patent or not. So that is a part of the agenda also, and then we have some questions and answers at the end of the show. As already mentioned, I'm Jørgen, and Jens is on my side. You cannot see him yet, but he will come right onto the screen. But from the start of, let's see what AI tells us about patenting of AI in Europe. You can see my screen dump here, and if AI is to be believed. Computational models and algorithms such as those that AI and machine learning are based on are generally excluded from patentability in Europe as mathematical methods. Core AI inventions, those that define an improvement in the field of AI itself, are often subject to these kinds of objections. So that doesn't look very positive, does it? No, not really. It is sort of there's more to say about it, and we're going to look at that. But immediately, when you sort of look at these kinds of answers in Europe, this confirms the impression that we have, that many of our clients and many within the field of patenting, many businesses, many anywhere, actually has this idea that AI and in particular software is very difficult to patent in Europe. But if we look into a few statistics here, it's not even statistics, it's concrete data on a special patent applications filed, patent families filed within a particular technical class, G6N, which is it's a patent class made specially for where many of these AI will appear. You can actually see the reality is not that this is totally impossible, it's undoable or anything like that. It's the reality is that there are a lot of patents applied for. And this amount is increasing. We don't think it will increase the same way as it is there. At some time it is going to flat a little bit, but anyway, the patent applications are there. A lot of patents are applied for, and it's interesting, of course, why these patents are there. If we look a little further from the European approach, and if we look at what the USPTO, their approach to AI inventions, it's a little different from the European approach, and we will start with this approach as it's a little more concrete, it's a little more tangible than a lot of other stuff that can be said about the AI-based patents. And as you can see, the US Patent Office does not really see AI inventions as something special, because they sort of refer to the usual parameters, to the usual criteria for patenting. Novelty, it has to be new. Non-obviousness is what you can say, it's the kind of the level of miracle we would call it inventive step in Europe, or it could be called inventiveness in China, whatever you call it. It's sort of, to what degree is this a technical miracle? And then utility and patent eligibility, it means it has to be tangible, and it also has to be part of sort of what can actually be patented. There are exclusions in the US, in China, in Europe on what can be patented. And I'll get back to that very soon. But from the start, I need to emphasize why we think that many patent applications on AI are a little troubled, why it's difficult, and why many people actually even Google AI algorithms believe that it's difficult or impossible to patent. It is that if I show this map to you here, you can see our office in Aarhus, patent room. That's where we live. If I were supposed to go somewhere from patent room, for instance, I would like to go to Legoland. From the start, at least, it would be a very good idea that I decided that I actually wanted to go somewhere and what I wanted. And this difficult question about what do I actually want to for instance, to patent is a difficult question, but it's something which needs to be discussed or internally, or sort of be considered very much in the very beginning, because there might be absolutely good reasons for patenting whatever you want to patent in terms of AI, but there may also be the case that what you would like to have a patent, you cannot get a patent on. So there's no reason, there's no clear road to where you want to go. But the next thing is actually, and this is what I would like to highlight with this road finder here, the root finder, and that is that many patent applications in relation to AI and software is maybe not very clearly set out from the beginning, in the sense that how I have a goal, but how do I get there? I mean, when I go to Legoland, I'm not just going to drive north and expect that Legoland will be in front of me. I have to consider reality. I have to consider which roads are feasible, which roads are possible. Where can I get there fastest? Where can I get there cheapest? And also, I would also like, as you can also see on this map, there are alternative ways of getting there. Because sometimes you cannot get there as fast as you wanted the first route you picked. And so just as in real life, if I would like to go to Legoland from my office, when I want to have an AI patent, I need to consider how am I going to get there? I need to consider the options. And I am going to highlight two. They're very simple criteria, but these are incredibly important, and these are sort of the crucial and in the coming years, the most important criteria to consider. There are, of course, I have to state that we have a relatively few minutes to go walk you through this. There's a lot to be said. There's loads of case law in the US. There's loads of case law in Europe, and there is guidelines in China you can consider, and all of these jurisdictions see this differently. But what I'm going to say here is something which, in our mind, is something which generally applies and really needs to be considered. So, as I said, stuff has to be new. Of course, it has to be in order to be patented. It has to be at this level of miracle, non-obvious, inventive step, inventiveness, and it has to sort of incorporate. It has to be legible for patenting. It has to not be excluded from patenting. Taking the first part, considering again the road where to go, eligibility is something which is looked at and I will focus shortly on the US compared to Europe. In the US, when you sort of set out your journey, it is important that your patent application has some, you could say, some buzzwords. It might look to, in particular to Europeans, a US patent application, the stuff you put into a US patent application may look a little sort of extravagant, a little too much spending on not sort of the core, the invention. But the thing is that in the US, it's very important that some of the phrasing regarding eligibility, how the invention, the AI-based invention, the software invention is actually it's tangible. You have to have that in the patent application from the beginning. And it actually, in our mind, if you do this right from the beginning, it's typically not a complex task. If you do that, then you can actually go on later on in the discussion. When you pass this patent eligibility test in the US, then you're good to go and into sort of the normal discussion about inventive or non-obviousness in the US. And it's relatively easy, but some patents in the US are a little blocked by this. But again, as I said earlier, the US is much more patent friendly to AI and software than other countries, including Europe. So if you define this right from the beginning, you have a very good start in the US. In Europe, the test of patent eligibility is basically very low. It's very easy to phrase a patent claim which is sort of within what you can actually technically patent. The only problem is that when you have done that, you can easily make it impossible for yourself to get patent, because you make phrasing in the claims that will sort of kill the next step that you have to take care of, the next threshold you need to pass, and that's the inventive step. The challenge is that in Europe there are some very particular requirements regarding steps in the claims. About some of it is non-technical, some of it is technical. If you do this wrong from the very start, there is basically no return, and you are, from a patent perspective, pretty dead. So these two simple factors, instead of sort of a high-rising discussions of whether AI can be an inventor or not, these two issues about patent eligibility and the inventive step, the level of miracle, this has to be taken care of from the beginning. And if they are present, definitely you have there is a possibility that you can get a patent. You can get a patent on AI, and the AI field of how to do it is going to change over the next years. The European Patent Office has just updated their guidelines on the 1st of March, right, just a few days ago. So this is it's on the move, this field, but it can be done. And it has been done for many years, many years actually. Going back to the statistics I showed you in the beginning, I would like to highlight for this particular class, I shared the information about the technical class within where many of the AI patents are applied for. You can see a little map here, a heat map, where you can see what we also definitely experience in our day-to-day work is that in the US, in the US, there is a lot of patents on AI. In China, there's a lot of patenting of AI, but in Europe, we are not so much into it because it's more difficult. And what I just would like to end this part of the presentation with, before Jens takes over and shows you some interesting examples on practical patents, is that if you are having something that is maybe a little difficult to patent, be careful not to look into Europe and then sort of lose sort of confidence in that you cannot get a patent because you cannot get it in Europe. Many of our clients, many companies, small or big, needs to go to the US because it's a huge part of the sort of the business, or where the investment development is actually made. So it's important to have it there, but where sort of patents are maybe a little more difficult to get in Europe, but a little more optional. But this is sort of how it looks as today. A lot of patents in the US and China on AI, and in the future, we also, of course, going to see a lot of patents and even more patents in Europe. But it's not that much because it appears so difficult. But Jens will now go to give you some examples.
Hello, I'm Jens Eversen, and I'm just have to move the window here. I don't know. So we are going to look at a few examples. I have 4 examples. I don't know if we can manage to do them all. But common to all the four examples that they are from the life science or healthcare field of technology, they are all about using AI and algorithms. So in the inventions, they are also all common in that the focus in the patent, the focus in the discussions with the patent examiner to get the patent granted, and so was not about the AI in particular. So these are practical examples of patents that have been granted, and Jan just showed you there are thousands of these granted every year, and we just have 4 here to look at. So the first example is from a Korean company called Huron. I have not brought any examples from our own clients. I just found examples from the world, patents that have been granted. This one is a Korean company called Huron, who makes software for to look at the medical images. And this is about a software to find a tumor on medical images. And on my slides, there will be some more text than on Jørn's slides, and we are not have the time to read it all now, but you will get the slides afterwards, and you can dig into these examples in more detail. But on this slide, I have simplified the claim that Huron actually got granted in Europe, and it is about pre-processing images, then divide them into regions by means of a neural network, and cluster the regions and extract features for each cluster, and then derive diagnosis information about the tumor from the extracted features. So they clearly have AI here. They mention a deep neural network-based learning technique in the claim, so that is part of the patent scope. But it was not what it was about when they had to discuss with the patent authorities to get this patent. Actually, in the first attempt, they had not written the green parts, the parts that are green on the screen now, was not in the claim, and the examiner thought that this was known already. He found a document also using a deep neural network for dividing into regions and finding a tumor in medical images. So this was simply not novel. Then they added this green part. And remember, this is a simplified claim. It is a little more detailed in reality. But by adding these specifics about what they find in the diagnosis information, they got the patent examiner convinced that this was inventive over what was known beforehand. They could also have started adding specifics about the AI, or talk a lot about that, and our AI is different than what was known before, or something like that. But in this case, they didn't do that. So this is one example of a strategy to deal with this kind of objections, where they actually managed to get a claim granted with almost no specification about the AI part. It has other specifications instead. Yes, and they managed to get it granted in last year in all the big markets. The claims they have granted are not identical in all these countries, but it's the same invention that is patented. So it could be done for them also without saying much about AI. Of course, it requires a description. They have a long description with examples of what the AI can be, how you do this, find the tumor in the image. But in the patent claim, the scope of the granted patent, it is actually not specified. Then going into the next example, Tata Consultancy Services is an Indian company, and they make software for all the wearables and smart devices we are using nowadays. And they have this patent for determining the quality of PPD signals. And PPD signals are, I think you know, all these small lights on your smartwatches. You have a lights shining on your skin, and from that it can determine a lot of things about heart rate and breathing and everything you can with your smartwatch nowadays. And they have made some improvements for that in this example. And this is again a simplified patent claim. It was granted in Europe last week, so it's really new. And they have this about getting a signal with heart and breathing, and then do a few things that sounds more like AI or something like that, and then classify. The last point is classify the quality of the signals as a good signal or a bad signal. So the classifier is there. In the beginning, they didn't have the green part in the claim, and the examiner, the objection in this patent application was that the claim was too broad compared to what they had explained in the description, because the examiner thought that this can be done in so many ways that it would not be fair to grant the broadness that they had first asked for. So to deal with that, they added the green parts, be more specific about the AI, but I don't think they are very specific. But just one of the practical ways to do it in general terms from their description. And you can note that in the second last bullet, they have now said that they have training data containing PPG segments annotated as either good or bad. So these are labeled training data they use. So that is, of course, a limitation and an explanation about how you can do it. And this claim was then granted in Europe last week. This is an example of some of the content in their description. They also have a lot of evidence that this actually works, and it works in some cases better than competing ways to do it. And they have included all this evidence to show that it works, and it may be necessary to do that to have experimental data. Example number 3 is from the fertility area, where we have Fred Robotics, says the company name on the patent, but in daily terms, I think they call themselves OMA Robotics. And they have made this method for, you can see on the picture, you have sperm cells in a Petri dish swimming around, and you need to take one of them, retrieve one of these sperm cells from the Petri dish. So they have this claim, and this is the full claim. It is not simplified. This is a granted claim in the USA earlier this year, and it does not talk about AI. It says that you have a video, then you find the gamete, it's the sperm cell, in the video frame, and then you can move it around. They have a stick that automatically can move the sperm cell in the direction they want, and then they can retrieve it. All very conceptual, and it's granted. Of course, this is based on AI. Everything happening here, finding the sperm cell on the camera and predicting the direction it is going, and all that is based on AI of some kind in the machine, but it's not mentioned in the claim. They got this granted without mentioning AI. You can see from claim number 2, which I show now, which is not limiting, because the patent is granted with claim number 1, but what they have in claim number 2 is what they would have put into claim 1 if they did not get the patent. So you can see that their strategy would be to then mention that we use a first trained model and a second trained model, and then it begin to sound like it's actually AI in there. But this is a very conceptual patent they got here. They also have 53 pages and 22 drawings of description to explain how this can be done. And the paragraph I have put here, which you cannot read because it's so small, but it has a long list of different AI algorithms and so that models, and so that is usable for this purpose. The last example, I've just selected this one. One reason is that it is from hospitals and universities, so it's not a commercial player in that sense. And I know some of you may be more like hospitals and universities than commercial companies. So they also patent AI-based stuff. And the other reason is that this will show a difference between the USA and Europe. So this is a claim granted in USA last year. And you can see it starts with a treatment method for a specific type of cancer. And they detect specific genes, or measure specific genes in the tumor, and then they find a risk score based on that, and from that they can, in point C, they can determine the prognosis for this patient, and then in the last step they provide therapy to the patient based on a chemotherapeutic agent from a list of 6 different. So one thing to, again, there's not much talk about the AI, how the AI works, how they achieve this. So again, they got this patent without having this as limitations in the claim. Then what is very interesting you can do in the US is that they have actually got a patent on treating this specific type of cancer when you have made the prognosis based on these genes and using one of these 6 chemotherapeutic agents. So no one can treat patients this way in the USA without an agreement with one of these companies or hospitals, universities. So what is interesting is they also tried to get this patent in Europe, which also makes sense because they are based in London. Actually, a few years before, they already got the patent in Europe. And you can see here that in Europe, they didn't get the treatment patent because that is not possible. In Europe, it's forbidden to patent the treatment of a patient. But they got the patent maybe even broader because in Europe, they have a patent for predicting the prognosis on this patient. The claim doesn't mention the chemotherapeutic agents. It only mentions the genes that we should look at to find a prognosis for this cancer. So it was granted in both US and Europe in slightly different ways. And they also included a lot of material in the description. And this is more like, this of course is based on patient data. And they have used that in the description similar to the way you would use patient data in a research study paper, scientific paper in a journal, by explaining the cohort characteristics of the patients you have selected and anonymized examples, for example, in the patent, to show that what your training data is, the kind of training data you use, and as evidence that it actually works, this method. So yes, this was 4 examples of things that have actually been granted as patents.
Yes, and now sort of having established that yes, patents can be applied for and you can get granted patents in the US, in Europe, in China, then sort of the next subtopic of this seminar is that in particular within the AI field, it's typical a collaboration, even if it's big companies, but it's typically applied, in particular in the field that you are from here. It's a collaboration between parties. And in this collaboration, it's important to sort of consider from the very beginning, when you get into this, yes, you can get a patent, but do you want it? And is it your interest to have this patent? So establishing at the beginning, establish, yes, stuff can be patented. I can be patented, just as software can be patented. But what we sort of also based on experience in collaboration between parties and patents is that this is a very important topic to get right from the beginning. And the best way of doing this, we would very much like to emphasize this particular point of the seminar, is that have some clear discussions with whatever partner you have from the very beginning. And I'll just show you a few considerations you might have, because in a collaboration, it could be a healthcare provider, it could be a hospital, university, whoever is a data provider. It could also be a life science company. And But what very often happens nowadays is that the AI competence needs to be dealt with by someone else, someone you collaborate with. And I guess quite a few of you are some of these guys who actually sort of are the guys who are going to solve these AI challenges. But how sort of are we going to cut the cake here? That's important to discuss from the very beginning. And there are very sort of different ways of thinking that depending on which party you are. If you are sort of the developer, you're the guy who is going to sort of get this going based on the AI, based on the data you will get from a collaborator. And you have some interests, and I'm just putting a name on what is totally obvious. It is that this type of developer is not in particular interested in coming up with a lot of brilliant solutions, and then a third party is going to take over. If you, as a company, invest a lot of time and money in this, for instance, a startup company has absolutely no interest in spending too much effort on this. If sort of the party sort of continues, the third party gets to a competitor. So this is sort of the mindset which you as this party would have, of course. In the collaboration with here the healthcare provider, hospital, wherever it is. The other side of the equation has sort of similar issues, because if I, for instance, was going to engage with, if I was a hospital and I were going to engage with someone who is going to use my data, or maybe not my data, but the data I sort of can provide with, then I would be probably interested in being able to actually go to someone else if it doesn't really work, because sometimes these types of collaboration do not work, and it's important that you as a collaborating party is actually able to go somewhere else. In this it could be very easy to fix if it was only the points I had here. But the thing is now, you also, everybody, the two parties also have sort of the total consideration, and knowing that, especially Jens showed the last patent, granted patent, you could see here, of some considerations about predicting use of very, very well-known chemotherapy agents. So the thing is that whatever collaboration you might engage with as the healthcare provider, the hospital, or the developer, there might be someone else who actually has a patent or is going to get a patent. So in order sort of to protect this and protect the investment, more patents are applied for in this field, and this is a consideration for you to think of when you engage this. Am I going to patent this? Or actually, if the patent I can get, is it worth it? Can we deal without patents? Because again, as was mentioned in the beginning, there are some types of patents which are difficult to get, and some patents which are not very attractive. And then in that sense, it might just be easier to keep whatever you have, sort of, you would call it a trade secret or whatever. Point is that when you engage with a collaborating partner, a part of this, a typical fruitful collaboration is that you actually protect their collaboration against sort of third parties, which might actually go and compete and make it impossible for you to continue your work. Yes, there's a question.
Yes, there's a question. Sorry. Yes, there's a question from Martin North. He asks, how easy is it to circumvent these types of patents, and is it enough to that the training data is different, or the methods are different, or the structure of the final model? So
that's an incredibly good question and very relevant one. This is exactly what sort of is a big deal in the sense that many patents, and Jens, we didn't come up with examples because we have some, of course, we patent this a lot, but we would definitely not just patent a random forest algorithm or something like that, that some people does, actually, some patent applicant does, because it's too easy to circumvent. So, but sometimes, of course, you want to do it, but if you want broad patents, the training methods are maybe not usually the good way to go, but you could actually get stronger patents if you want to protect the features of what you actually want to do, and what is actually what you want with your collaboration. So the short answer, and not so short anyway, is that sometimes you might feel forced to apply for some of these patents where you just patent a specific way of training, which maybe in 1 or 2 years time from now is what people will patent. But nowadays we believe that you should not waste money on patenting actually training algorithms. You should rather focus on what the algorithm does, and in that sense make them broad. It is possible to make the patents on AI extremely broad, and you can also get them extremely narrow and useless.
Okay,
Yeah.
and there's a very good question following up on this. It's from Maiken Wolderslund. She asks, who can help determine whether it would be worth going for patent on a university hospital-based innovation department, or for a university hospital-based innovation department? Who can help them with that?
That's well, how much am I allowed to advertise?
Well,
we can you can call or write us or call us.
Yeah.
That's what we do in our daily work.
So you or somebody?
Yeah,
like
someone like us. Yes.
Patent specialist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who has the knowledge about patenting AI? Of course, yes.
And there's another question here. Could you elaborate as to why data provider would not be interested in patenting an AI model?
A data provider. No, actually, if I was a data provider, I would very much like to do it. But the thing is that, for instance, if it's a hospital, there might lack sort of the financial means to do it, and maybe the strength in actually getting some patents where you're prepared to engage with some of the big guys, you could say. That's one thing. Another thing is also that we mentioned in the very beginning, that we still see a lot of questions around, in particular in Europe, that some assumptions that you cannot patent this. You cannot patent the AI, and that's why people are not doing it. And that's sad. So that's one of the reasons. No, so I can come up with these reasons. I'm not saying the last one is very good. I understand the priority. You have some money. You have to sort of figure out which priority you as a hospital needs to do. But in our mind, of course, I would say that I would agree with the way the question is put, namely that it's there are many good reasons for hospitals to protect sort of the project, or at least engage with someone who can help protecting it from third parties.
And I just want to ask you a question, because I can see that there are more questions coming in now. Okay. Would you like to continue with this Q&A, or do you have some punchlines that you really would like to come across?
No, we
first,
have,
and then we continue with questions afterwards.
We have further slides. We would rather have the questions.
You'd rather have the questions. Okay, fine. So both are smiling. Yeah. So given the significant costs associated, let me just say that this is Jose Manuel Sertan and something more. Given the significant costs associated with the patent process, what strategies can startups employ to initiate this process without incurring exorbitant expenses? Alternatively, how have other startups managed to navigate the patent process efficiently while minimizing costs?
Yes, that is a very good question, and this question is not a new one. It has sort of been the case for software startups generally for many years, and I have to say that we have Jens and I here have worked for many companies who started up from a professor in university or something like where there was low money, but they needed sort of to protect something. I think it's incredibly important to we would recommend finding an investor who could pay the initial costs. And then there are actually there are some strategies in ways you can file the patent application so you don't get the cost up front. So you can postpone the cost, that's one thing, the way you apply for the patents, but also these exorbitant costs are also a challenge, in particular if you try to get these patents in Europe. And that's a very, very sad reply to give. You have to spend a lot of money, whereas sort of the easy, where we have actually, for some startups, we actually advise them just to go to the US because that's the cheapest way of getting what they really need. But there is a lot to be said about that. But one thing is incredibly important, and that is applying for the right patents. Because if you apply for something, a narrow patent which only protects some, just like the question just from before, then the patent is not worth a lot of money. So rather spend some time in the beginning to figure out, can we get what we would call a broad patent? And instead of filing 10 patents, then actually just file 1 or 2, as few as possible, but it's going to the right scope. Yes.
Thank you. There's another question from Sarah Solino from Beatrice, and she asks, how does one navigate the patenting process for an AI algorithm that utilizes federated learning similar to any other invention? Sorry.
Could I get the question again?
Yes. So how do you navigate the patenting process for an AI algorithm that utilizes federated learning?
Federated
learning. So as I understand, yeah.
From the last part, the first time you said the question, it sounded like everyone else. So this is apparently a way of using AI that is not, they have not invented it, they're using AI the way other also uses it. And that is also the case in some of the examples I showed you before, I believe. For example, the one with the tumor identification, where the problem was that it was not novel to use AI to find this tumor, and then they had to find some other details that was novel, something that was different from what others had did before. And it doesn't have to be in the AI algorithm or the training data. It can be everywhere in the whole concept, the whole product or service or whatever it is. So that would be part of when we talk with clients about a new invention, before starting to draft anything, we're going through these questions about what is it that you are doing, what are the competitors doing, or what was known already to do. So where's your difference? And then we talk about whether or not this difference can be patented. It can carry a patent through. Yeah.
Okay. I have another question. It's probably a bit in the same style. So I think that there's a lot of innovators being part of this webinar today, and I would like to ask you, what if you don't have a trained model yet? So do you have to wait to the patenting process until the data is obtained, or can you start already before the model is trained?
That is also a good question, because that is often the case. Actually, in the patent world, it's very important to be soon with your patents before you start to publish anything. But then the problem is that if you have to patent soon, then maybe you're not finished with your work. So that is also a normal case for many. And then there could be different considerations to do it early or not. So it's not impossible to patent just because you have not finalized all your research. As long as you have a good idea of how it would work, you can explain what the training data would probably look like, how it would probably work. It can still be done, and often you can make follow-up patents when you then have the more specific data or final model and so on.
Thank you. And there's another question here. They asked if you could, or it's Johan Munk Pagnes who asked if you could elaborate a bit more as to why a data provider would not be interested in patenting an AI model. I think we already touched upon that, but
yes, I think that was what Jørgen explained with the hospitals and the limited budget maybe, and sometimes they also have some public interest or so exactly. they cannot own patents or whatever, but still they should consider how they then want to deal with this IPR and these questions, for example, by letting a partner patent and then make a contract. Or somehow, because it would also be bad if everyone else could just patent what they actually did first.
And it could be argued definitely that a hospital in the public interest should not spend its money on sort of excluding stuff from others. On the other hand, a hospital would sort of need some collaborators, some investment and so on. So as Jens said, it might be a good idea. Actually, you can even get away with not patenting, but having collaborators doing it, and then use this and get for instance, a free license or a defined license. So I could find many good reasons for a hospital not spending its very important time in patents and letting someone else do it. But as long as you can have it in a sort of in a license contract, that you have a license to do whatever you want.
Yeah. There's another question from Monica. You mentioned in the beginning about reasons to patents, that we need to consider this in the discussion, but what aren't good reasons to embark on a patenting process that will not decrease the motivation to keep working in AI? I don't know if I get it correct. So I hope that what you like to hear a bit more is about what are the reasons to actually engage, because if you don't engage in patents, I suppose that the motivations to develop new methods, etc., will decrease.
Yeah, and that's sort of what has. This is an ongoing discussion. We have had it sort of also for software for many years, and also within many technologies, also within life science generally. Actually, you can sometimes get pretty annoyed when sort of the costs are too high in some medicaments and so on. The thing is that actually, and this is just saying, this is also a matter of opinion, but I'm not certain that many companies agrees to the thinking that patents will reduce the activity, the motivation to do something better, because the thing is that every kind of development needs some funding. And nowadays we also represent quite a few investors, and they are not going to invest in anything unless they can actually get a share. Otherwise, they would be very good people, and we would praise them for being that. But the thing is that typically people invest in something where they can get a stake. So the US has been patent active, allowed software patents for many more years than we have had it in Europe. And in practice, we do not know US as a country where there is little development in software. Actually, it's the opposite, because US attracts investment, it attracts activities. It's where many, I can also say, European companies have ended up there, because they can actually get the money, because the investors can have this legal monopoly, and you can like it or not, but it attracts in investors. So I think it's pretty. I don't buy that this restricts development. I don't think reality shows it.
No.
But, yeah.
And we have a few minutes left. There's just a little added question. If you have any knowledge of soft funding that small companies can access to start the process of initial news review and so on.
We do have right to us. We're not experts in it, but we have knowledge.
Okay.
Yes. Should we wrap it up here?
Yeah.
Or would you wrap it up?
Would you like to add a few words more, and then I'll wrap up in the end?
Yeah. I think before Jens wraps this totally up, I just want to highlight that patents may be an asset. We have represented for more than 20 years. I've been working with patenting and software for almost 30 years. And what is also important when you, in particular as a startup, where we have experienced that we can both go through due diligence, you can get a nice exit. This is what some startups dreams of, but also that if you switch from one technology to another, patents can be sold. And we have experienced that with many software companies, or at least some software companies, that you can actually sell. Okay, we don't want to do this anymore, but we have this patent, we can sell it, and then we can go on with something else. And then Jens will wrap everything up before you wrap things.
No, this is just very short because we don't have much more time. So if you go back a few slides here, then the point here was that I think we have shown you that there is no general formula to patent AI. There's all these things that Jørn explained about the invention step and eligibility. And my 4 examples was very different, and they had different problems and succeeded in different ways. So there's no general formula, but so you can lose, or the great invention you have can be lost by not doing it right or by not doing it at all. But on the other hand, it is also possible to hit the center of the target and get the patents, as we can clearly see from the numbers. Jørn showed you thousands of AI patents being granted every year, and from our practical experience also. With a little help from my friends, I say here, the idea here is that please contact experienced patent advisors within the fields of AI and healthcare, life science, if you embark on this, so you get it was best possible start on this. I think that was
okay. So I will just thank you very much for joining this webinar, and thank you to you, Jørn and Jens. It has been fantastic that you have actually shared your knowledge with us in the last hour. Thank you very much for that. And then I'll just like to repeat that you'll get the presentation afterwards. And I would also like to tell you again that this is a webinar series. The next webinar is up on Friday from 1 to 2 in the afternoon, and I look very much forward to seeing you all. So thank you very much.